Urban population is set to increase to 5.2 billion. Today, cities already account for 40% of final energy consumption and up to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. Reducing energy consumption and switching to renewable energy and heat often goes hand in hand with a gain in quality of life for residents. Through cleaner air, less noise, less sealed land, and more green areas.
And welcome back, everyone. And that is indeed our topic. How can municipalities transform energy and transport systems while simultaneously enhancing the quality of urban life? Because it's all about livable cities. How are digital applications transforming urban mobility and other systems? How can emerging and developing economies foster adoption of new tools and technologies to ensure a broad-based transformation to sustainable living? Those are our key questions, and now it is my great pleasure to introduce our eminent speakers. And as always, I'm going to keep the introduction short to maximize our time for discussion, and would be very grateful if you will also keep your responses concise. Thank you. And I begin here to my left with Cuba's Minister of Energy and Mines, Nicolas Livan Aronte Cruz. A great pleasure to have you with us. Welcome. And it is also a pleasure to welcome Alamine Ousmane Mey, Minister of Economy, Planning and Regional Development for Cameroon. And also with us, Cheikh Niane, Permanent Secretary of Energy at the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy in Senegal. Also with us, Rana Adib, great to see you again, Executive Director of the Renewable Energy Policy Network for the 21st Century, a global public-private multi-stakeholder network on renewable energy based at the United Nations Environment Program. And with us also is Rohit Sen. He is Head of Sustainable Energy at ICLEI, the Network of Local Governments for Sustainability. He's coordinating and managing all activities and projects related to the sustainable energy transition. And finally, I'm very pleased to welcome Cecilia Anderson, who is lead for urban mobility and urban basic services at UN Habitat. She's an urban and regional planner who previously worked at the urban division of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us remotely. And before we begin, dear audience, I'd like to get a quick take from you on the following question. In the coming decades, what percentage of urban expansion will be in the developing world? So please answer that, and we have 3 choices that you can choose between, and don't go Googling this, please. Try to answer it from the top of your head, 65%, 80%, or 90%, and we'll come back shortly to look at whether you got it right. So now, let me go to all of the panel with an opening question that essentially is the same to all of you, and it's to draw on your own experience, if you would, please, to share examples of best practices. What approaches and measures are you seeing being adopted by innovative cities and either in your own country or, of course, in the countries that you work with, adopting these solutions to achieve the dual goals, both of sustainable energy consumption, but also enhancing quality of life, because those 2 things really need to go together in order to generate public acceptance. And I'll start right here with Minister Cruz.
Sí, bueno, buenas tardes. Para nosotros es un honor, para Cuba, participar en este importante diálogo.
Sorry, I'm hoping we will get translation. One moment. Do we have translation, dear? Okay. Oh, you weren't using your microphone. I'm sorry. That's the problem. Here.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Okay.
Para Cuba es un honor participar en este importante.
Right, good afternoon. For Cuba, this is a major honor to be here at this energy transition dialogue. One of the priorities in my country is to try and provide the entire population with clean and secure energy in accordance with the 7th SDG.
significativas a escala global.
Even though our greenhouse emissions are not significant when comparing them to the global scale, nevertheless, Cuba has undertaken to observe the results of the Paris Climate Agreement, and we will support the transition to renewable energy. So our main objective is to achieve 100% of renewable energy for our country, especially solar and wind energy, and that will enable us to gain technological independence, and we will support sustainable development. We believe that first and foremost we must make sure that the cities will accept this responsibility and use energy as efficiently as possible to achieve sustainability and better quality of life of our citizens. Now, specifically, this means it is possible to make sure that these energy measures are supported by governance, and that is an incentive. We need to provide incentives for everyone to contribute towards making optimum use of waste, for example, to use photovoltaics, wind energy, and to achieve optimum energy efficiency when it comes to lighting cities. And of course, we need campaigns to make sure that sustainable energy is used in a clean way. All these objectives will ensure better quality of life for the population, and at the same time, this is necessary to preserve biodiversity and the environment in general.
Thank you very much. And let me go on now to Minister May, please. Same question to you. What your experience is, what you see as really key tools and technologies to make cities both livable and more sustainable?
Well, I thank you, Melinda, for giving me the floor. I will start with words of gratitude to the organizer of this event, the German government, and we are very pleased to be here and talk about an important topic, the dialogue about transition, energy transition. We were very inspired by the different keynotes, addresses, and presentations, insightful reaches. And I want to touch on your question because this is going to be one of the major challenges on the continent in Africa, particularly because of the development of the population, the urbanization, and the consumption of energy, as well as the emission of green gas CO2. Why is it critical? It has been mentioned. 5 billion people will be living in cities. On the continent, we'll be having 2.3 billion people, and probably 80% will be moving towards the city, and their consumption of energy and the emission of green gas is going to be an important issue to deal with. I want to mention 3 or 4 points which are going to be critical in solving this problem. First is awareness, information, education. Awareness, information, education, because these concerns we are talking about are not sometimes very well understood at the grassroots level. And it's therefore important to inform, to educate, and to create more awareness. The second point is about efficiency before coming to how to deal with the situation. Efficiency because right now we are already consuming, we are already wasting. So we should improve on that before we get into reducing the way we are consuming energy in the long run. Of course, we have to change our way of thinking and functioning. Private ownership should be looked at differently. Community approach should be probably the road, the path to go. Otherwise, we'll have cities which are probably very densely populated, but the quality of life and the consumption of energy is not going to be the right thing we are doing there. Consequently, we'll be producing more green gas Last thing I want to mention, which is one of the area we are talking, it's bus rapid transit. Cities are going to have a lot of people. One of the big concerns is how are they moving? Are they moving easily? Are they moving with respect to the environment? Are they creating less pollution? Are they more efficient in their movement? Bus rapid transit is a project we are dealing with in Cameroon with the support of the World Bank. And we hope that these new technologies, new development, better anticipation and urban planning will lead to better cities where we both have quality of life as well as efficient consumption of energy, as well as also the renewable energy we need in terms of supply. Cameroon is a blessed country. We have more than 80% hydroelectricity. We are promoting solar energy, and we do believe that for the future, cities should be in the line of our policies towards sustainable, efficient, and green energy consumption. I thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll maybe come back to a couple of those points a little bit later on. Let me go now to Permanent Secretary Nyane.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for this invitation. We are very grateful to be here with all the Senegalese delegation here. And what I wanted to say regarding this point, the minister from Cameroon already said the challenges, the main challenges for Africa. But here, especially in Senegal, where I'm from, we are facing also to this challenge. But 10 years ago, our government created a national agency only in charge of energy efficiency and energy management. And so after the creation of this agency, the government wanted to tackle the challenge of the regulatory framework. And then we put a law in order to promote and even to forbid the importation of some of the products that can affect our energy efficiency. For example, the lightings, this old lighting and so on. And all of this is within a global strategy in the country, which is what we call Plan Sénégal Émergent, emerging country, other country. And in this plan, energy, of course, is a big challenge because in our country, we are also facing the challenge of access to electricity to everybody. But in the same time, we need to educate and communicate to make the people to understand that we can be developed country even by respecting the environment and also having a good policy in terms of energy efficiency, because this is the challenge, how people will have a way of life that will be very to satisfy them in the evolution, but in the same time facing to the energy challenges. And we also have another agency only in charge of renewable energy. In Senegal, currently, we have around 30% of our national grid only from renewables, solar and wind and hydro mainly. And we are really trying to put policies and also to think again how we are going to construct our building and so on, how we are going to manage the mobility, and also what are the main challenges in terms of digital and so on. So I think that during the discussion we will go further and explain more what we are currently doing. Thank you.
Let me just ask you one follow-up now, if I may, because in so many panels here at this year's BETD, we've heard people saying we need to focus more on energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is so important, but it's often the neglected component. So just say one or two words, if you would, about the actual concrete changes you have seen in energy consumption, in energy behavior and energy saving since you put into place your ministry? Because that's fascinating to have a ministry dedicated to that.
Absolutely. What I can give like an example, for the lightings in Senegal, we have the biggest project in the world in terms of solar lightings. We import more than 100,000 solar lights in Senegal that we put in all over the country. And this was the first phase, and we are going to do the second phase. And when we are going even in the factories, to visit this thing, they told us there is no project like that in the world. This is a concrete action that we did just to promote and to remove all this old lighting that pollute the environment, also that consume many energy. So, and with this, we have a big economy in terms of energy. In another hand, we are for all our buildings, administrative buildings, so we are putting also efficient and solar panel to enable these buildings in the city, this administrative building, to all move into solar in an efficient way. And what I was mentioning also was the regulatory framework. If you don't have a proper regulatory framework, you cannot move forward in this energy efficiency management. So this is also a very important point. And in Senegal, I think that we understood this one maybe 10 years ago, and the government put in place all the arsenal regulatory in order to move forward and to go further. And now we are also working with the different cities to move forward and to communicate and to educate, like I was mentioning, people to understand the needs in implementing such projects.
Thank you very much. And we'll dig a little bit deeper on the question of regulation and policy a little bit later. Let me go now to Rana Adib to hear your thoughts on our first question.
Thank you very much. First thoughts on the question, I think that municipal governments have a key role to play in the energy transition, and that's something which we see actually globally. A billion of people are living in cities that have a renewable energy target and engaged in the transition. And I think this is really building on the part that municipal governments also have a regulatory authority. And what is important about this, it means like 25% of the urban population lives in cities that are engaged here. What I think what we observe basically is that cities are very important to drive basically the transition, not only from the energy supply side, but from the demand side. And this is fundamental when we are looking into the sectors of heating and cooling, so in the building and industry sector, and of transportation, road transportation. Now, how do they approach? And I think they have a very integrated approach here, which is important. So on efficiency and renewables, for instance, it's very clear that when we are moving, I take the example of the building sector. It's 50% of the demand of the energy consumed is in heating and cooling, and half of it is in the building sector. Local governments can basically have net zero standards, building standards, and sometimes we really observe that these are technology neutral. So it can be by energy efficiency measures, it can be by energy saving measures, it can be by measures on materials being used, and obviously also by the renewable energy supply. And I think this is really something where we see that municipal governments are often even more advanced than national governments, because they have the possibility to act here in a certain sector. In the transport sector, we observe also that there is a big push for developing public transportation, which is walking and cycling. Obviously, this has been developed very much by many cities also in the COVID times, where there was raising awareness also about the importance of air quality, and the WHO standards have been a driver for municipal governments to engage here. But when we are looking into the transport part, we see that the trend is electrification. Electrification means it is more energy efficient. What is often not happening yet is that there is a direct link to also provide the electricity with renewable power. Now, what can governments do here? And we see that municipal governments are doing this, is using their regulative frameworks to impose it, engaging in their procurement strategies. They can clearly decide what they procure, which technology, what they put in place, but also inspiring city players to engage in the transition. When we're looking into commercial fleets, we see the diesel ban that have been installed in cities. And I guess like if you ask what is the innovation, I think there's a lot of policy innovation actually happening at the city level, which really allows to not only look at the power sector, we are speaking a lot about the power sector at the national government side, from the energy supply side, but really in the main energy consuming sectors where unfortunately the I guess like the transition is lacking behind. Just two numbers to finish. In heating and cooling, renewable energy share is only of 10%, in transport of 3.4%. And this shows that basically we need the municipal governments to bring this to 100%.
Thank you very, very much. Let me now go on to Rohit Sen from ICLEI to hear what you are seeing amongst the cities in your vast network and what tools and technologies you think they're using that are of particular interest.
Yeah, thank you first of all for having me here. I think the fellow panelists already touched upon many points which are important, but let's take a step back and see where we are. I mean, we already know the amount of energy we consume in cities. A lot is wasted, whether it's heat, energy, or electricity. We know that millions of people are still not having access to even basic form of electricity. Two sides of the coin, and then CO2 emissions are record high. Yet we are looking at urbanization is going to happen in the next decades, more than 80% to 90%. So how are the cities, the local governments going to take up this challenge? I think to look at this is adding to the supply side, so renewables is definitely in for generation. Looking at energy efficiency, I will add one more, energy conservation, because that's important to even see the demand that you have can be handled in a proper way. We see the development happening in the West or in Europe and in the US. Can the same model be applied in the cities coming up in Africa, in Asia, and so on? Perhaps not. The fabric needs to change based on renewables transitioning from fossil fuels, looking at how various vectors like energy storage, green hydrogen, if I may, can be utilized in this in this scene. And across the sectors, so whether it is transport, agriculture, buildings, and so on, local governments have a lot of authority which they can use. Yes, there are issues where they need to work with the national governments, and national governments, ministries need to give them the authority to play along and do the work that they need to do. They are closer to the citizens in the city. They understand the fabric and the need of the citizens and can deliver with active participation from various stakeholders from the cities and regions. Some of the key points that I think they can think and use working at urbanization, developing new cities, which are more planned and more, let's say, climate neutral in a way.
Let me ask you a naive question. Difference between energy conservation and energy efficiency. How would you describe that for a layperson?
I mean, I would say energy efficiency into components, into machines and so on. So instead of using a tungsten bulb, you're using an LED, but you're still using light at a time when perhaps you don't need it. Yeah, conservation is switch it off. So reduce the demand so that the generation from the renewables could be adjusted, because not often you will see big cities might have the same amount of resources to meet the demand. So that therefore I would put three together.
Thank you very much. Let me go now to Cecilia Anderson, waiting patiently there on screen. Please, your thoughts on the same question.
No, thank you so much, Melinda, and such a pleasure to be part of this panel. And as you were mentioning, we're seeing cities actually taking quite a role as champions and ambassadors in contributing to reducing energy consumption and promoting more compact cities. And I'll probably take more of a planning perspective to our cities and how planning can sort of reduce the unnecessary travel and how we can build more cities that are more energy efficient. And in this regard, I just want to highlight a few aspects of that. One is about developing neighborhoods that promote walking and cycling, where opportunities and services are within a short walking distance of where people walk and live. And many of you are probably familiar with the concept of the 15-minute city, which, for example, the mayor of Paris is adopting. But then you might have also heard about the 1-minute city that Stockholm is aspiring to. It's also about prioritizing non-motorized transport, which was mentioned earlier as well, by creating adequate space for streets. So it's about an efficient street network that allows for better connectivity. So we're talking about small blocks and more intersections, which will allow for better movement within the city. We also need to plan for mixed land use, where residential, economic and commercial activities can take place in the same neighborhood, reducing the need to travel long distances. And it's also about locating development near public transport nodes, as public transportation really offers the best mobility solutions to saving energy and moving people quickly and efficiently across the city. So it's really about that compact city supported by short transit commutes. And with these principles, I think you can form an energy efficient city which is more integrated and brings people, activities, and the built environment together, creating a better quality of life for all and ensuring particularly that we don't leave anyone behind.
Thank you. Not leaving anyone behind is a topic that I want to come back to a little bit later on, but thank you so much for those thoughts. Let me now drill deeper on some of the things that you have mentioned and also some of the things that your particular cities are facing. And I'll begin again, if I may, with Minister Arronte Cruz. And we heard Germany's Environment Minister speaking just before this panel, talking about Germany's immediate action plan for adaptability for municipalities. Well, Cuba, of course, is facing the climate crisis right now and facing water scarcity, drought, more frequent storms, and more. Resilience, of course, is a key component of livability. So a question to you about how you are meeting these challenges and also their repercussions for energy systems, especially in Havana, of course, Cuba's biggest city.
Sí, bueno, como expliqué anteriormente, es una prioridad de nuestro.
Yes, as I just mentioned, within our government we have a priority, which is implementing solar and PV energy sources, renewable energy sources within the energy matrix. We must underline one thing: our policy making or our policy is undergoing a change, a transition. We want to reach a 100% energy matrix that is renewable. When we talk about municipalities and cities, and as well, of course, about our capital, well, we focus a lot and have focused a lot on PV panels installed on residential areas, and we have implemented policies which are supposed to improve water pumping systems based on solar energy. We have also adopted policies aiming at focusing more strongly on water supplies that are solar powered, which is a lot more efficient. We place priority on housing and building where there is no capacity to build PV plants or panels on the roof. But in these areas, we still want to address other energy sectors. And we take energy from other sources, solar energy, as the final consumer. So we have a more clean city and can reap the advantages of solar energy. We are also promoting a new policy to support e-mobility. We are adapting the city in such a way that it is more apt for this transition towards more e-mobility in our city and in our cities in general. It is mainly about public transport and urban transport, but we are also addressing the entire service sector. We also have an energy efficiency campaign which aims at more efficient lighting. We are using LED lights in buildings, and in public buildings we want to achieve more efficiency. We want to achieve a better life quality for our people while also reducing emissions, of course, in big cities.
Thank you very much. Minister May, Cameroon has been working with UN Habitat, represented here by Cecilia Anderson, to develop projects with local authorities and other government entities in areas like urban-rural linkages, a key topic that I hear again and again on panels about sustainable cities, but also on climate resilience, on upgrading of poor urban districts, and more. Can you tell us a little bit more about this and also how that work is influencing energy consumption?
Once more, I want to see that the issue of climate change as well as development of cities with respect to all these challenges is a concern both at the central level as well as at the local governmental level. The two have to work hand in hand to address this important issue. More importantly, the local government is the key driver. The government of Cameroon has been working with institutions like United Nations Habitat as well as the World Bank to promote new plan, new program, for instance, inclusive resilience and green city, as well as developing rural areas to make life suitable, affordable, livelihood possible in rural areas instead of just moving to urban areas. This has to do with the planning of these rural areas in anticipation, because as we say, prevention is better than cure. So local administrative authorities have their development plan. The central government come in support and bring in institutions like United Nations Habitat and other institutions to put in place this kind of project and attract the necessary funding. Let us not forget the fact that these opportunities in terms of technology, in terms of new materials, low cost and more efficient materials have to be also acquired by these local authorities and governments, which is necessary and requires some funding. We are proud to see that these models have been launched in Cameroon, and we see that there is a reduction of movement between rural areas and urban cities. But we want to believe that take into consideration experiences in different other places of the world, we should increase on efficiency in the areas where it's already being consumed, as mentioned by some of the panelists already, but project ourselves in such a way that development should take place not in a centralized manner, but in a decentralized manner. Mm-hmm. And development in a decentralized manner is about production, transport, supply, and efficient use of energy wherever you are. And I will end up by saying all this new development, taking advantage of new technology, taking advantage of digital leapfrogging, we want to think that it is only through great, better education and planning, right planning, that we'll be able to implement. Otherwise, we will be forced to destroy what has been done in cities that are being constructed, not in an orderly manner, but in a disordered manner, which is not the one we are looking for. So this is, I believe, the experience we are going through. It's a challenging one. I'm pretty sure we have to learn from many other parts of the world, but it is the direction to go if you want a better life in both rural as well as urban area in our countries.
And I think I'll jump over to Cecilia Anderson, if I may, given the fact that Habitat is the partner in that particular work that Minister May was just talking about. You're an expert in the field of mobility, and I wonder how you see the mobility aspect of that urban-rural linkage that Minister May was mentioning. And perhaps you can also just speak a little bit about what has to happen to make public transport a bigger part of the solution to sustainability and livability in cities, including also, obviously, transport systems that make use of renewables.
No, thanks a lot, Melinda. And yeah, just like you were saying as well, I think when it comes to mobility, we're looking at figures that show that nearly 30% of energy consumption is due to the movement of goods and people. And this is also linking then urban areas with rural areas as well, where you have the transfer of goods and people between cities and villages. And of course, a lot of that is actually then involving transportation, highway traffic. So this actually tells us that the measures that we need to take to have the greatest impact on reducing energy consumption should actually target then highway transportation and single-use vehicle. And this requires a shift in how we plan and the decisions that policymakers are taking to focus more on zero and low carbon mobility by promoting sort of public transport as a way of actually reducing energy consumption, emissions, and air pollution. And I think many of you might also be aware of the avoid, shift, improve approach, which I think many cities are actually adopting as well, which is if we can avoid or reduce the need to travel through sort of integrated land use planning and reducing those trip lengths, it is a way of actually being able to ensure that we reduce our energy consumption in that way. And of course, local authorities have a key role to play in that, and also linking then with the hinterland. And it's about also shift. How can we seek to improve the trip efficiency and move towards a more low energy consumption and environmentally friendly transportation modes, such as public transport. And local authorities can shift the modal share of its transport system by providing that infrastructure, but also the incentives for people to choose public transport and active mobility rather than private cars. And we've
say a word about incentives, if you would, please, because I see that our time is rapidly dwindling, and I wanted to get to that later. So I'm just going to jump ahead. Just say a word about incentives, please.
Yes, about incentives as well. I think it's really important that we actually incentivize people to actually choose public transport as a way of their most chosen mode of moving around in the city. So incentives like, for example, we've seen subsidized public transport tickets that you can actually subsidize that, whether it's like an annual ticket that is being bought. But you can also disincentivize, which I think is really important as well, about increasing parking fees or reducing parking spaces in cities so it becomes more difficult to actually use a car. But I think it's also about providing affordable and easy access to energy efficient modes of transport and mobility. So it's about supporting on the neighborhood level, for example, electric charging facilities or bike share schemes, making those more available and linking that then with public transport. And sometimes it's not about very heavy investments in, for example, light rail or metro systems. It can be investment into a bus rapid transit system, which is much cheaper and is a way of actually then being able to support then a larger number of people to be able to move around the city more efficiently.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me go now to Permanent Secretary Nyane, if I may. And by the way, I was very pleased to hear you talking about bus rapid transport earlier on, because in fact, it used to be always, that was a province of Latin American cities. That it was the Latin American cities on the panels who would talk about that. And it's great to have Senegal talking about it. So, just talk to us a little bit about Dakar, because Dakar has 25% of Senegal's population, I believe. And I wonder what you are doing or what you are seeing in Dakar itself that really is taking that city toward greater sustainability and resilience.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this question, because as you was mentioning, in Dakar, we have around 4 million people living in Dakar, which is only 550 kilometers square. And so the main challenge will be, of course, a part of the construction that I mentioned earlier. It will be to have a sustainable mobility strategy. And in that perspective, we have this rapid bus transit, which is a very big and very important project for the government that will be in place end of this year, beginning of next year. And this will enable to have around 300,000 people per day transportation, because we need to know that in Dakar we have 80% of the transportation by road, and the government understood that we need to create a new kind of sustainable urban mobility. And we implement this express train, regional express train, which is the very big project that we just put in place and that is in service since last year. And this at least enabled to have 200,000 people that now are taking this train and avoiding cars. And in the other hand, you have this rapid bus transit. So all of this is in a strategy that the government put in place to have a sustainable urban mobility to avoid emissions and also for energy economy. And in another hand, government have also for public administrations, the hospitals, and all the administrative buildings, an efficiency and very ambitious program for that to reduce this emission. That's why I will also take this opportunity to tell to the private sector, to the German private sector, if they really want to invest in energy efficiency and in renewables. We have different projects and many projects in terms of energy efficiency in Senegal that we are looking forward to having a great cooperation on that.
I see Rana Adim nodding emphatically as you speak, and I wanted to ask you, Rana, to talk a little bit more about renewables-based energy as a stepping stone toward net zero for cities, and what actions you think need to be taken not only to bring that along, but also to mitigate adverse impacts for populations during this transition period. Because we're looking at, basically, it was said again and again yesterday in our opening session, we're looking at a real paradigm shift, a revolution in the way our cities are going to be organized.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I think it's actually coming down to a very strong integration of many aspects we've heard here. I think we had the planning part, which is fundamental, infrastructure part, policies, and then a topic we have not spoken about is, I guess, like two topics, is investments, because the infrastructure need massive investments, and that's often something city governments can actually not do on their own. So they need to collaborate with the national governments, with international partners, and also with the private sector. And I think this is also when we are looking into some cities that are really driving this forward, there is a strong collaboration with those players and a strong multi-level governance, I guess. Another aspect, you spoke about the citizens, and I think especially in the current geopolitical situation, the reality is we have a fundamental structural shift that needs to happen for a diversity of reasons. This needs to be supported by citizens. And the municipal governments are closer to the citizens. Now, what can they do here is, and I think this is where basically the decentralized nature of renewable energy really allows to involve citizens to directly engage and benefit from this change. Not only because it's more livable cities and a better air quality, etc., but today for cost reasons partly, but also because they can directly benefit from the renewable electricity, for instance, or the heat that is being produced. And I think this is something which allows, obviously we need massive infrastructure and generation, but the fact to also look into, and especially when we are speaking about energy access, a decentralization, this allows citizen support, and it also allows an energy, the resilience of the energy infrastructure. And just, I'll take the public transportation example. And I think this is really where we have new alliances to look into. Public transport, one of the paradigm that needs to, or a fundamental that needs to be there, is that there is a good service of public transport. The energy cost is the second, when you look at public transport operators, energy cost is basically the second part after human resources. Today, it means that investing basically in renewable energy here allows to reduce the cost, but it also allows to build up a resilient energy service, so having energy security for transport service security. Mm-hmm. And this really means that there needs to be, I guess, a stronger development also of the narratives when we are pushing for the transition, to really think about what players do we engage with and need to engage with to create the buy-in on the demand side, so energy consuming sectors, but also on the citizen side. And I would say like renewables is today clearly a least cost, but also a sovereign solution with regard to this. But to really make it accepted by all players, the national and municipal governments really have a key role to play by having incentives, by creating investment opportunities, having public procurement to create markets for operators to engage and investing into the infrastructures.
Thank you very much. And I want to go now to Rohit Sen and stay with this question of how we take everybody with us. And, you know, we're looking at a transition that is enormous and that is going to be very, very expensive. And we are going to see in many cities rents going up, heating costs going up. Certainly we're seeing that right here in Berlin. I just got a letter from my energy company. And it's very complex to know how to deal with this. Not only because I was going to be taking part in this conference, but after receiving this letter, I went to the owner of my building and said, what can we do? What could we do to, solar? And we went through the whole list, heating pumps and so on. And we didn't come up with a lot of options, I have to tell you. And I found myself wishing badly for more information, for local initiatives, for outreach. So how do we do it? And I'm talking about from the vantage point of a person in a wealthy city, in a wealthy country. How do we ensure that we take citizens along in cities and countries at all levels of development?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that I quickly want to mention. So first of all, to answer that question, multi-level governance is in the heart of this transition. Yeah, it is important that we do not reinvent the wheel and do not have redundancy between the work and the targets of national government and the local governments. Second, create resilience, create energy security at the city level, local regional level, by having decentralized renewable energy was mentioned here. You mentioned about the links between urban and rural, very important. Example, if I may take Frankfurt, very high demand during the day, drops down like anything during the evening, nighttime. People start living in suburbs, peri-urban areas. The model is the same, going to be same in Africa, going to be same in Asia, we don't know, but things to think about. Second, rural areas will have land that you can use for renewable energy generation. Very important because the demand is in the cities. So these interlinkages are very important to develop the cities of the future. Awareness creations, making consumers as prosumers, very important, so that the local government, national governments, apart from that, the citizens are getting involved and having a share in those projects and renewable energy stakes. So some of them, we are now dealing with cities and regions in our network, and we are trying to work with them with various solutions, methodologies, tools, so that these cities, local governments, stakeholders, private sector, financial institutions, and most important, the citizens of those cities are then moving to this transition together. And for that, dialogue needs to happen. And then the action and the impact needs to happen on the ground.
Which is exactly what we're doing right here. Let's take a look at the results of our Slido survey about what people thought regarding the percentage of urban expansion in the developing world. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to say you got it wrong. 80% of you thought, or let's say 55% of you think that it is 80%. Actually, it turns out it's 90%. That's the smallest share of those responding to the poll. 20% said they figured it was 90%. So in fact, most of us are underestimating the degree to which urban growth is occurring in the developing world. With that said, our clock is flashing at us. I'm just going to go straight down the panel and ask for one sentence from everybody about what you say is the most crucial thing that has to happen to make sure that cities are part of the solution in getting us to net zero by 2050. Minister, one sentence.
Que hayan políticas del Estado y el gobierno y de los pobladores en
We need government policies, we need measures taken by urban authorities and others that make sure we can reach this objective.
Multi-level governance, what was pointed out several times. Minister May?
Well, I will easily say, let local authority play their role. give them the support from the government, the private sector, all the different stakeholders to execute and realize their policies.
Thank you. Rana?
Just taking another angle is defining long-term, medium-term, and short-term energy transition targets at the national level in the end-use sectors and work with the local governments to implement them, because they are the ones who can push from the energy demand side.
Thank you. Permanent Secretary?
Yeah, thank you. For me, it will be a regulatory framework, the right one, decentralization, sustainable urban mobility, and communication.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Rohit Sen?
Yeah, so from my side, we heard about finance, we heard about policy, we heard about multi-level governance. These things may happen, may not happen. We cannot get stuck. Local government, cities need to think out of the box, be more innovative, see what tools and policies do you have and what you can bring up in the forefront to have this transition happen. Think out of the box. If you do not have authorities to have utility under your belt, think of decentralized mini-grids.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And finally, Cecilia Anderson.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think from my side, I think I'll take the planning approach. You were talking about urban expansion. I think we need to invest in more compact cities, invest in connectivity, walking, cycling infrastructure, so that we can actually cities can lead to reduced energy consumption.
Thank you so much. It's been a really interesting panel. I'm very grateful to all of you for taking part and in sharing your insights and experiences. I certainly have learned a great deal from all of you. Let's give them a warm round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen.